Thank you for watching Scary Animal Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe.
Welcome back to Scary Animal Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Asia and back to a time when elephants were more than the majestic wild animals we think of them as today. Most people think of elephants as brutish and simple beasts, but the stories below will cast them in a very different light than you may now view them. Here are just a few of the harrowing tales. Our first attack takes us to the tropical jungles of eastern India and to the state of Odisha. This state lies near the border between India and Bangladesh and is still thick jungle, into which civilization is barely crept and modernity is still a mirage. The people of this area live close to the land and risk their lives regularly, as their land is filled with bears, leopards, and tigers. But in this land, the elephant claims more human lives than any other previously mentioned, with about 300 deaths per year caused by them. The locals regularly encounter elephants and other animals as they migrate through the area in search of food or water. They become so accustomed to seeing them that they begin to identify certain individuals of the elephant herds and understand their temperament. In June of 2022, 70-year-old Maya Murmu was collecting water from a source near her village. She was preparing for the day's chores, as she had done nearly her entire life. She wasn't a poacher or a hunter. She wasn't hostile to local wildlife, and didn't lead a life that would brood a hateful relationship with any of them. As she drew water, a disgruntled elephant must have caught her scent on the breeze. If it wasn't the presence of a human, then something else must have enraged the planetary pachyderm as it plowed through the palms to pummel the woman. After the elephant was done severely injuring Maya, bystanders ran to her aid. They quickly took her to the nearby hospital, but it was too late to save her, and her injuries were too serious. Her final moments were undoubtedly filled with terror as the elephant trampled her underfoot, leading to her demise. But if that were the entire episode, it would be all too short. Shortly after her death, the family and friends of Maya gathered up her battered corpse from the hospital and brought her back to the village. They prepared her body for a Hindu funeral ceremony, which would give her loved ones a chance to bid farewell to her. In this ceremony, the deceased was laid upon a large funeral pyre, constructed of wood, designed to burn the corpse into ash, which would be sprinkled into a nearby river, assisting the soul of the deceased in finding peace. This entire ceremony is usually completed within the 24 hours of the passing of the person. The mourners piled up the wood for the pyre and prepared the rest of the ceremony as beautifully as they could. Her body was set out at a home for viewing, and her friends and family paid their respects as they gathered. Suddenly, the cacophonous cracking of underbrush startled the group, and people began to scatter in different directions. To the funeral attendees' amazement, the same elephant that trampled Maya had emerged from the nearby jungle. It wrapped its trunk around her body while in repose and flung it a short distance. Next, it again trampled her body underfoot in an apparent fit of rage, possibly fueled by the mistaken idea that she may still be alive. After crushing her corpse, the elephant was apparently satisfied that she was finally dead and stormed back off into the rainforest. This behavior is far from simple or brutish, but hints at a perceptive and contemplative thought process. It harkens to an animal mind that develops ideas and concepts centered around expectation and outcomes. If the elephant was angered at the thought of Maya not being dead, as it had thought after trampling her the first time, then how thoughtful and complex do elephants really think? A few years prior to this, a farmer was tending his crops in the early morning hours. A nearby herd of elephants must have caught his scent on the breeze and immediately became incensed. The entire herd ran toward the man and trampled him to death. In the same year, a 50-year-old man who was also tending his crops suffered the same fate. A herd of elephants converged on him as well, for unknown reasons, and trampled him into the ground, leading to his death. But conflict between wild elephants and rural people are not new, nor are they the most gruesome aspects of the relationship between humans and elephants. As late as a few hundred years ago, elephants were used and even trained for much more barbaric behaviors. In ancient courts, ranging from the eastern Mediterranean to the east coast of Vietnam, they were used in capital punishment by monarchs and madmen alike. In Indian culture, an elephant driver, if you will, is known as a mahout. As a demonstration to the public, citizens found guilty of stealing, rebellious behavior against the government, or other offenses were tortured by elephants, with hours of being tossed and pushed along the ground. The elephant was trained to kick and shove the human, but not strike or crush them enough to kill them. The most egregious case of this brutal and terrorizing form of punishment took place over 5 days to one man. After watching the man get battered for such a long period of time, the Emperor Akbar of the Mughal Empire decided to spare the man's life and released him alive. But the story didn't always end with such a happy ending, if you'll consider it that. Sometimes the accused was sentenced to a punishment known as something called a trial by ordeal, in which he was forced into mortal combat with the elephant. This was clearly a confrontation that the trained elephant would always win, and led to the man's death consistently. This public punishment was exhibited from time to time to show the citizenry that the ruler of the area was powerful, as the mastery over such an awesome beast was intimidating to anyone who may oppose their leadership. It wasn't just the Mughals who enjoyed these fear-inciting displays. Leaders from Burma to modern-day Malaysia used trained elephant executioners to terminate accused men as well. The execution began with the elephant's handler leading it around the accused several times. The elephant would then be commanded to wrap its trunk around the man, as well as the stake he was tied to. It would then forcefully pull both of them together from the ground and toss them up into the air. As the man tethered to the stake fell back toward the ground, the elephant would impale the man on its tusks, which had been sharpened for just this act. After impaling the accused, the elephant would scrape them off of its tusks and stomp on them until death. In the southern regions of Vietnam, an accused person would be tied to a stake in similar fashion, but to build the fear in the accused person, the herd of elephants were released from a fair distance away. The person tied to the stake would experience several seconds, if not minutes, of terror while watching the elephant stampeding toward him, trained to stomp him into the ground. There were many additional tales of people being sentenced to be crushed under an elephant's foot or to be stampeded to death by an entire herd of well-trained execution elephants who would do so on command. As if the experience of being crushed underfoot by a single or multiple elephants wasn't terrifying enough, in some instances their tusks would be equipped with sharpened metal blades that they would skillfully use to dissect, disembowel, or dismember people. Some of them were fitted with special metal shoes with blades which extended beyond the size of their enormous feet, designed to slice limbs from bodies as they crushed the accused under their feet. Many of the rulers who used these trained execution elephants would receive a nauseating amount of pleasure and gratification from watching the execution elephants do their duty. They would go as far as training some elephants to take their time in dispatching the accused, by kicking them before ending their lives, or by carefully placing their feet on the arms or legs of the accused to neatly nip off each limb in turn. Others were trained for the simple act of raising a rear leg, just to lower it on a bound man's head placed on a pedestal. The most eerie example of just how well trained these execution elephants understood their mission and executed their training occurred in India. After a brief war with the British, a mahout from one of the defeated king's execution elephants demonstrated how well the beast knew its orders. In front of British observers, the mahout would order the elephant to let him down from its back and stand beside it. Then the mahout would give the order to slay the wretch, at which point the elephant reached out its trunk toward an imaginary man standing in front of it, and wrapped its trunk around him and forcefully threw him to the ground. It then demonstrated on the imaginary man how it would stomp on his arms and legs only for several minutes. After that, it would raise its trunk high over its head and stand still, ready for its next command. The mahout would then direct the elephant to complete your work. The elephant would lift one of its feet to about where the imaginary man's abdomen would be, and place its other where his head would be, clearly demonstrating the coup de grace and termination of the accused man's life, imaginary or not. This level of vision and imagination demonstrates that the elephant could picture a man in front of it right down to the proportions of his body, then see itself performing a series of acts clearly culminating in the death of the human. The review of this information has me both amazed and terrified. My question to you is, do you think that these tasks are rote training behaviors, or are these contemplated acts from which these elephants felt as much enjoyment as the rulers ordering the acts? Does this prove that wild elephants can learn as well as possibly teach future generations to kill people, infringing on what is perceived as their territory or resources? Is it possible that elephants are plotting a Planet of the Elephants type of revolution to overthrow humanity and take over the world? I would enjoy reading your comments, so please post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Animal Attacks. If you like this video, please consider hitting that like button and clicking on the bell icon to keep you notified of our latest video releases. Sharing our video links on your social media might help save a life and spread the fun. As a member of our human network, be careful out there, because you don't want to end up on an episode of Scary Animal Attacks.